What's going on, everybody? KG here. I've got a very special video for you today focused on the S95F gaming experience, and I'm doing so using one of the best games of all time, Expedition 33. Yes, this game just came out, but it is already in my top 10 games of all time, and it may even be in my top 5 games of all time. It is that good. You should play it, and don't worry, there's no spoilers in this video. This is all very early gameplay. But this video isn't about the game, it's about the S95F and the experience that I had with the S95F in both SDR and HDR. Think of this as the S95F's dedicated review video for gaming specifically, because that's really what it is. And I want to start by talking about one of the things that people were saying is an issue with the S95 series the last couple of years, and that is the issue of dropouts. I tested the Xbox Series X, the PlayStation 5, and a laptop, as well as a Nintendo Switch. And when I have it directly connected to the One Connect box, it has not given me one dropout whatsoever. So no dropouts on my experience with the S95F. And I've played countless hours. I've beat this game that we're watching specifically on the S95F. And this game is about 30 hours long. And that whole entire playthrough, no dropouts whatsoever. However, with that said, when I'm connected to my splitter to have both the S95F and the S90F getting the same signal from either the console or like an Apple TV, then I did have dropouts with the S95F. And I want to point that out specifically because talking to Classy, he had dropouts with his AVR. And while this isn't an issue that happens frequently, it does happen when you have it connected to an AVR or a splitter. And no, it is not an HDMI bandwidth issue. That is misinformation that's being spread out there. You will have enough with the One Connect box. Alright, so now let's get into some more gaming experiences, and this is something that I think I have to put an emphasis on. I do believe it is the best, and I'm not even exaggerating, it is the best OLED TV. It is the best TV period for gaming that you can buy today. I think that not only is it the most capable TV in game mode, it's using the best panel that you could get for gaming, in my opinion. And it is also going to have some of the best gaming features on the market today. Now, it's just my personal opinion, but I really think that Samsung's gaming features are above the others because of Game Motion Plus. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with Game Motion Plus, it's going to give you a very smooth gaming experience. I already have this game running at 60 frames per second. It's in performance mode, so it's always going to be smooth no matter what. But when I have Game Motion Plus turned off, I notice it's not as smooth as when Game Motion Plus is on. There's something about Game Motion Plus, even in 60 frames per second, it just feels buttery smooth. The best way I could describe it is watching water flow. It is so fluid. The motion is incredible in game mode with Game Motion Plus turned on to level 2. And this is something that you could do with any game, and if you play it with the 30 frames per second game, it can make those games feel like they're 60 frames per second. And yeah, the 60 frames per second games even benefit from it too. And it does tend to make those games feel like they're 120 frames per second. It's motion interpolation for gaming, and it works really well. Motion interpolation is not great with TV shows and movies, but with gaming, it's a different story. Games are meant to be seen in 60 frames per second. Games are meant to be in these high frame rates. So motion interpolation for gaming is not a bad thing, and it makes way more sense than having it on TV shows and movies, where TV shows and movies, 24 frames per second is where you need to be with those. That's what is intended for the movie. Games, on the other hand, if they could all run in 60 frames per second or higher frame rates, they would. They're just not capable of it a lot of times due to some of the development restrictions on what goes into the game. Sometimes games are way too intensive graphically to achieve 60 frames per second. But with Game Motion Plus, a lot of these issues are solved. And I don't think that it's talked about enough on this platform. I don't think it's talked about enough, period, that Game Motion Plus can really be a game-changing experience. And it's not exclusive to Samsung's most expensive TVs either. They have them on some of their cheaper TVs. No other TV companies have adopted this. And why haven't they is my big question. I don't know, because this is a brilliant feature. And yeah, other TVs have motion interpolation, but it's going to come at a real big hit to your input latency. And that's not the case here with the Samsung, where you're taking a minimal hit and the game is still very playable, very responsive. And to me, it feels like I don't even have the feature on when I'm playing. So unless you're playing like a fighting game or a racing game, most people probably won't experience any issue with that. So yeah, that's Game Motion Plus, and I do really want to highlight it because it is good. So that would be one of the reasons to get the S95F if you're looking at it compared to say the G5 or the Bravia 8 Mark II. Because of that feature, it could give the edge to the S95F over those TVs. The other reason is SDR game mode is incredible on the S95F. If you need the brightness capability, the S95F will absolutely give it to you. I don't see any restrictions with the peak brightness in SDR for the S95F, where with the other TVs, you may see some restrictions. I know LG specifically locks down their SDR peak brightness setting in game mode, which has always been a pet peeve for me personally. So if you haven't realized by now, this is an SDR game. A lot of people think this may be a HDR game, but no, this is an SDR game, which is fine because the vision they created here in SDR is brilliant. And this made me reconsider the way I look at SDR games, because when you have a TV that's very capable like the S95F, you can have a great experience with it. Now, I know there's a lot of people that argue you don't really need SDR brightness unless you are in a bright room. And I say in some cases they're right. It really depends on how bright your room is. But even in a dark room, if you have two TVs and one's not as capable as the other, that SDR gaming experience just isn't going to feel the same. And I'll have a good example of that, the S90F versus the S95F. I don't look at SDR the same way in games as I look at SDR in movies and TV shows. I do believe that games need to be a little bit brighter in SDR compared to TV shows and movies. You can chalk that up to being a personal preference or whatever you like, but it's just my opinion that SDR gaming is something where I do need a little bit of peak brightness to have a great experience compared to a different TV. Maybe it's because I've seen so many TVs side by side next to each other, and the ones that don't have enough SDR brightness capability in game mode is the ones that just feel a little bit flat to me. But that's just not the case here with the S95F, and I think it's awesome for SDR gaming. And for HDR gaming, it's out of this world. It can get to peak brightnesses we have never seen before on OLED TVs. And if you compared it to an LCD TV side by side, the LCD TV would struggle mightily. The reason why I want to bring that up is because a lot of people are afraid to get an OLED TV because of burn-in. But I think the burn-in fear is burned into people's minds more than the actual chance of you getting burn-in. I really think that burn-in is often fear-mongered and pushed into a direction that I don't think is realistic for most people. Can you get burn-in? Yes, you can. It has happened. I know there's going to be comments that say, oh, I got burn-in. I'm sorry you did. But the truth is, most people won't experience burn-in in their lifetime of owning an OLED TV before they replace it. I think that small chance of you getting burn-in is something you should totally overlook in getting an OLED TV over an LCD TV, because it's just superior in every single way over an LCD TV. And that is not just because of the motion. Yes, motion is a big advantage to OLED TVs, but when you're talking about the actual brightness capability, OLED TVs are better than LCD TVs in terms of peak brightness and holding their brightness in game mode for sure, because the game is constantly changing environments, changing scenes, changing lighting, and the backlight is not going to be able to keep up with that. And if we're talking about the best gaming TV and you have the money to buy whatever TV you want, you can't consider an LCD TV over an OLED. You just cannot. Now, when picking a TV for gaming, one thing that might matter to you is whether or not it could do a high frame rate support. And these can go up to 165 Hertz gaming support for the S95F. And that's really great because that's going to match what the G5 can do as well, where the C4 and the S90F is going to be limited to 144 Hertz. And then the Bravia 8 Mark II is only limited to 120 Hertz, which is fine for consoles. If you're just having a console, none of this stuff really matters. It's really only going to matter if you have a capable gaming PC. So that is one thing you keep in mind. Now, on the topic of S90F versus S95F, in a lot of cases, they can look very similar in HDR games, especially games that aren't configured really well in HDR. But the games that really take advantage of HDR peak brightness, you can see a huge difference between the S95F and the S90F in terms of the peak brightness, in terms of the peak highlights. There is really a difference there. And SDR brightness, like I mentioned earlier, will matter as well if that's something you care about. And this is going to be the TV I pick. The S95F would be the gaming TV I pick. If I'm primarily gaming, there is not a better TV, in my opinion, than the S95F from Samsung. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys want to see more videos just like it, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next one.